Imagine this. You're out on your own ranch, enjoying a quiet day hunting, when suddenly you get slapped with a fine from your HOA. Sounds crazy, right? That's exactly what happened to me. I never expected my simple pastime to spark such a huge conflict. The homeowners association claimed I was breaking rules, even though it was my own land. Feeling frustrated and unfairly targeted, I knew I had to do something, but what? This story isn't just about a fine. It's about standing up for your rights, fighting back when you're pushed around, and the unexpected ways things can turn around. After getting fined, I made a move nobody saw coming. I bought a piece of land that the HOA members used all the time for hiking. And then I closed it off. Yep, the same trails they enjoy became off limits. What happened next? How did the HOA react? Did this spark even bigger tension in the neighborhood? I'm going to take you through every twist and turn of this wild saga, from frustration and fines to owning the land they rely on. Trust me, this is one story you don't want to miss. Stick around, because what comes next will surprise you and change everything. So, let me back up a bit and explain how things got to this point. I've lived on my ranch for years, enjoying the peace and freedom of the open land. Hunting was never just a hobby. It was part of how I connected with nature and respected the land around me. But ever since the HOA took over some of the rules in our community, things started feeling more like a control game than a neighborhood agreement. They introduced all these new restrictions that made simple activities like hunting suddenly off limits. I was blindsided when the fine arrived in the mail. The HOA leaders, who mostly live in the nearby subdivision, kept saying these rules were to keep the area safe and friendly for everyone. But it felt like they were picking and choosing who gets to enjoy the land and how. What really pushed me over the edge was when I found out the hiking trails they built and encouraged people to use were actually on private land I didn't own, but they used every day. That's when I had the idea. What if I bought that land? If they wanted to limit my freedom, maybe I could flip the script and control the access they enjoyed so much. I won't lie, it was a risky move. I wasn't sure how the HOA would react or if things would get worse. But sometimes, standing your ground means taking bold steps, even if you don't know exactly where it will lead. Now, I'm left wondering, did I make the right choice? What's coming next? After I bought that piece of land, everything got way more complicated than I expected. The HOA members were not happy, actually, they were furious. Suddenly, the trails they had been using for years were closed off, locked behind gates, and no trespassing signs. It wasn't just about hiking anymore. It felt like a full-on power struggle. People who once greeted me casually now avoided eye contact or tried to argue about why I shouldn't have the right to close my own property. It was wild how quickly the neighborhood dynamics shifted. Some neighbors saw my move as a necessary pushback against the HOA's overreach. They started questioning the fairness of the rules and wondering if they were being controlled more than protected. Others, however, felt betrayed, especially those who loved those hiking trails as their go-to spot for weekend walks and family time. It was like I'd become the villain in their story, even though I was just standing up for what was mine. Some neighbors saw my move as a necessary pushback against the HOA's overreach. They started questioning the fairness of the rules and wondering if they were being controlled more than protected. Others, however, felt betrayed, especially those who loved those hiking trails as their go-to spot for weekend walks and family time. It was like I'd become the villain in their story, even though I was just standing up for what was mine. Meanwhile, the HOA ramped up their efforts. They sent letters, tried to get legal advice, and even talked about filing complaints. The tension was thick at every community meeting, with people taking sides and emotions running high. I couldn't help but think, was this really about hunting, or was it something bigger, about control, ownership, and who gets to decide how land is used? On top of that, I started hearing whispers about some members wanting to expand their control over more parts of the land around us. If they got their way, where'd be next? The lines between neighborly rules and personal freedoms were blurring, and I found myself caught in the middle of a growing storm. The question now isn't just if I can keep that land closed, but how far this battle will go, and what it might cost me in the end. The more I tried to stand my ground, the thicker the tension grew. The HOA wasn't backing down. They started organizing meetings specifically to discuss how to handle the situation. Rumors spread that some members were considering legal action to force me to reopen the trails or even take back the land. I could feel the weight of the whole community watching me, waiting to see if I'd crack or give in. At the same time, some neighbors quietly supported me, sending messages or stopping by to say they understood why I did what I did. But their voices often got drowned out by the louder, angrier ones. One evening, I showed up at a community meeting, thinking maybe we could talk this through. Instead, it turned into a heated debate, shouting, accusations, and frustration filling the room. The HOA president accused me of being selfish, putting my interests above everyone else's. I fired back, saying it was about respect and rights, about the fact that it was my land to begin with. But it felt like no one really wanted to listen, they just wanted to win. Outside the meeting, I found the gate to my newly bought land vandalized, paint scratched across the signs, locks tampered with. Someone was clearly sending a message. I knew this wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was becoming personal. The question hanging over me wasn't just about hunting or hiking trails anymore. It was about how far the HOA would go to control the land and how far I was willing to fight back. With emotions running high and lines drawn clearly on both sides, I was staring down the most intense moment yet. Would this all explode into a full-blown conflict, or was there some way to find peace? Whatever happened next, it was going to change everything, and I had no idea if I was ready. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, something completely unexpected happened. A few days after the vandalism, I received an official letter, not from the HOA this time, but from the county. Apparently, there was a dispute over the property lines of the land I'd purchased. According to some old records, part of the land might actually belong to the HOA or the community itself, meaning my ownership could be challenged. Suddenly, my whole plan to take control of the trails was in jeopardy, and the fight wasn't just about a fine or a closed gate anymore. It was about legal ownership, and that raised the stakes to a whole new level. This twist threw me into a whirlwind of confusion and frustration. How could something that seemed so clear suddenly become so messy? I started digging into public records, talking to neighbors, and even consulting a real estate expert, but every answer led to more questions. Meanwhile, the HOA wasn't hiding their excitement. Some of them openly bragged that they might finally force me off the land. At the same time, the community atmosphere grew even tenser. Some neighbors who had stayed quiet before now picked sides loudly, creating new divides where there hadn't been any. I found myself isolated, unsure who I could trust, and constantly looking over my shoulder. The battle wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about identity, control, and what it means to truly own a piece of this place. I realized then this fight was going to get even messier, and maybe even messier than I was ready for, but walking away wasn't an option anymore. The question now, how far would I go to defend what's mine, and what price will I pay for standing my ground? After weeks of digging through documents, late-night calls with lawyers, and tense face-to-face conversations, I finally got some clarity. The property line dispute wasn't as black and white as the HOA had claimed. In fact, a detailed survey showed that the land I purchased was completely mine, no strings attached. That moment felt like winning the lottery after months of stress. I had legal proof in hand, and suddenly the HOA's threats lost their bite. It was a huge relief to know the trails they'd been using without permission weren't theirs to claim. With that confirmation, I decided to take a stand. I officially closed the gates and posted clear signs about private property rights. The HOA tried to challenge it in court, but the evidence was on my side. Slowly, the neighborhood tension began to ease. Some neighbors even apologized privately for doubting me. The fine for hunting, it was dropped. and I was finally free to enjoy my ranch the way I wanted. Just when I thought it was all over, there was one last twist. A few weeks later, I discovered a secret HOA plan hidden in the meeting minutes, a proposal to buy more land around my ranch, aiming to surround me completely and restrict my access. It was like they wanted to box me in, make sure I couldn't escape their rules even if I owned the land.